Welcome everyone to Navro MedTech Unplugged, our monthly webinar series designed to give you an inside look at what it really takes to build and grow a career in the medical technology industry. So each month we sit down with industry leaders, innovators, and hiring professionals to really unpack their career journeys, share lessons learned, and offer some practical advice for anyone looking to launch into or level up their career in medtech. And if you ever miss a live session, don't worry. You can always watch the video recordings on our YouTube channel at Navro MedTech Recruiting, or listen to the audio version on the MedTech Unplugged podcast on Spotify and Apple. And if you enjoy these sessions, please hit that subscribe button. Encourage your friends and colleagues to do so that we can continue to bring you incredible speakers like we have today. So speaking of, I'm very excited to be joined by Catherine Jennings. She likes to be called Kat, so that's how I'm going to refer to her here on out. Division President of Peripheral Vascular Division at Boston Scientific. And Kat began her medtech career journey as an MBA intern. Over the past 2 decades, she's built an extraordinary career that you'll hear about that spans marketing, strategy, management, and now as a division president, she leads a global team focused on developing groundbreaking therapies that improve and save patients' lives. And today, Kat and I will discuss how her story of going from an MBA intern to industry leader was shaped along the way, and the pivotal lessons she's learned about growth, leadership, and building that meaningful career in medtech. So please welcome me in joining Kat Jennings. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Jenny. That's such a kind intro. Thank you so much.
Now, I know you're from, or you live in Minnesota, but where actually are we reaching you here today? Are you in Minnesota?
I am in Minnesota. I am sitting in my office watching the leaves change. So it's a beautiful time of year here. It's getting a little cold, a little chilly for those of you in warmer climates, but it is a beautiful time of year here.
Well, we are thrilled to have you. Thank you. So I think my first question is, for a lot of our folks listening who may not be familiar with, you're the president of the Peripheral Vascular Division at Boston Scientific. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. I get that question a lot, so it's a great place to start. So what we do in the peripheral vascular business at Boston Scientific is really, if you think about it, keep arteries and veins open outside the heart, below the neckline. So the entire vasculature outside the heart and below your chin, all of those arteries and veins are game for us. And we produce all types of products, whether it's balloons or stents, which are like a metal scaffold that hold an artery open, or a thrombectomy device that sucks out clot. All of those things are things that ensure that we're able to, manage the clots and also the lesions inside the arteries and veins.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to give everyone a quick reminder to make sure that you are on mute so that we don't get any feedback. That is a lot of geography to be covered.
It is.
I don't even think I realized, in my brain, I'm always thinking of peripheral because there's so many interventions and procedures that have to do with the leg, but you're right, it really is everything outside that area.
So yeah, we have everything from carotid products to products to manage AV fistulas, which are in your arms. So it's a ton of geography, like you said.
Okay, so can you share what some of these, from just a helicopter view, what some of these procedures and products actually are, what they look like?
Sure. So many of our products look like, imagine like a small balloon on a long straw, like a catheter, and you basically thread that catheter to where you might have a narrowing of an artery, and you use that balloon to effectively blow that artery back up to the diameter that you expect it to be. So that's one type of therapy. You may find that that's not sufficient to open up that artery, or for an example, a vein, and you might need to follow that up with a stent, which is like a mesh metal scaffolding that will keep that artery or vein open so that you can continue to have really good blood flow through it. Sometimes you might encounter a complete blockage, which means you need to do something a little bit more aggressive, whether that's atherectomy or thrombectomy, these types of procedures. So it's we kind of give you a full armamentarium of tools so that you can treat everything from more simple to more complex lesions in the body.
Got it. And I'm assuming these are performed in a hospital setting. Is it typically a same day procedure or do patients need to stay overnight? How does that look?
Yeah, it's a great question. It really depends on, in part, on where in the body their procedure happens, and how complex their disease is.
Mm.
In many of the cases, this can be a same-day procedure, whether that's done in the hospital or in like an ambulatory surgical center. In some cases where a patient has more advanced disease or maybe other comorbidities or needs to be monitored overnight, they might stay for a few days in the hospital to be monitored afterwards. But many of our procedures are same day procedures.
Great.
And the other thing I think that's just maybe to help the audience kind of place this, most of these procedures are done through very small punctures, usually in the femoral artery, which is the artery that's just runs right in through your between your hip and your leg. And so it's very minimally invasive. We're not cutting people open for the most part. And that allows for that really quick turn for patients so that they can get back to living their lives and hopefully having their pain alleviated and any associated comorbid issues that they're having alleviated.
That's wonderful. We often talk about just the advancements in devices in this space and how they're just getting smaller and more sophisticated. So that's a great example of, tiny little puncture hole, and you can really do quite a bit to impact a patient's disease state.
You got it.
So now, if you have peripheral vascular disease, this may seem like a very basic question. You mentioned pain. Are patients typically symptomatic? Do they know they have it? What does a typical patient look like that you might treat
Yeah.
with devices?
Yeah, maybe I'll chat a bit about patients that have this condition in their legs. So peripheral artery disease oftentimes will manifest as folks that have pain either walking or if you have a more advanced version of the disease, pain even when they're resting.
Mhm.
And that pain in their legs is because their arteries have narrowed. And so they're not getting enough oxygenated blood down to their foot effectively. And so that creates pain, ischemic pain is what it's called. And that's one of the things that we help alleviate by opening up these arteries so that these patients can then have that pain alleviated and hopefully then also get a chance to walk more and exercise more. And we all know that that has such enormous benefits for patients in the long run.
Oh, that's fantastic. So now that we know what your division does and what you're involved in, let's talk a little bit about how you got there. So you actually pursued an MBA before getting into the medtech space. So what first drew you to wanting to pursue an MBA?
Yeah, so I was not a business major undergrad. I was a biology major undergrad, and I had thought originally that I would want to do science and research. And after spending a couple too many summers pipetting things in a lab in a basement, I thought maybe this isn't really for me. And I started to interview with consulting firms, and I thought, gosh, this is more interesting. I have more passion around business than I do around kind of doing some of the basic research I was doing. And so I did consulting for a while and I got a taste of business, but I never had a formal education in business. And I thought it seems like a great opportunity for me to take a step back and do a full-time MBA, get that broader perspective, understand what an NPV actually is, and really hone my skills so that I could then go into industry in a more meaningful capacity than being an analyst at a consulting firm.
Did it feel hard to take that step back? It's kind of like a step back to take a massive leap forward, but I can imagine at the time it was probably a tough decision.
It was because a lot of people struggle with this, right? They think about, do I need an MBA? Is it worth it? Should I
Mm.
go full time? Should I go part time? Is it worth quitting my job to take on some additional student debt, et cetera? And, one thing that one of the ways in which I made that decision is I knew I wanted to make a career change. I knew I didn't want to do consulting because I felt like I'd figured out what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be able to make that change into some new field. And I felt as though an MBA was going to be a great way for me to bridge that gap between what I was doing and where I wanted to go.
Mhm. And you've got that background in biology. Did you always know you wanted to go into healthcare or med tech, or did that path sort of reveal itself along the way?
Yeah, no, it's such a good question because, I'll tell you, I worked in a ton of different industries, everything from fintech to um, servers, to IT. And then one of my clients when I was doing consulting was a pharma company. And I thought, gosh, pharmaceuticals, perfect marriage of my, biology background and business. This is what I should go do. I should go do an MBA and then go join a pharmaceutical company and do that as my career. And I thought I had it all figured out when I was going to business school.
What did you discover you hadn't had figured out?
So I remember going to this information session, really on a whim. A company called Guidant, which was doing an information session on campus, and they were a medical device company. And when I heard them talk about the way in which they could impact technology innovation, I was just completely blown away by the impact you could have on the actual technology itself. Um, I sometimes say that, in pharma, you're oftentimes playing the lottery. You're hoping that you get a molecule that works. And obviously, you try to do things that, move the odds in your favor. But, a lot of times it's throwing a lot at the wall and seeing what sticks. What I loved about med device was the ability to actually listen to what customers want and
Mm.
incorporate that into the technology itself and continue to iterate and bring new technology to the market. I just thought that was so much more interesting to me personally. And so when I left that information session, I was like, I've got to change my idea about what I want to do. I definitely want to do healthcare, but I want to do med tech because I think this is just so much more interesting, or I have more passion around this than I did with the pharma information that I'd gotten before.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's until you said it just now, I don't know if it really actually had occurred to me. And I've spent many years in pharma and in biotech and then many in med device. And you're exactly right. It's probably one of the few sectors of the industry where you can actually have an impact on the devices, and the technology, and hopefully for the better. Can you think of a couple of changes that teams you've been on have been made and where you've been able to have that impact to directly change technology and have a really nice outcome, or doesn't always work out the way we want, right? But some kind of impact into the technology and the disease states of patients it's treating.
Oh my gosh, I'd probably have too many to name, but one of my favorite things that we do here is invite physicians to get a chance to get their hands on some of the prototypes of things that we're working on and
Mhm.
get a chance to play with them in a model that simulates the use that they would have in the real world. And they give us feedback on this catheter, it's too short, or it's not soft enough, like it doesn't get to where I want it to go, or I need it stiffer because I need to be able to push it harder past this, tightening of this artery, or I'm worried about this potential complication because I think the tip is too sharp, or I need it sharper because I want to get through this occlusion. So there's just all of this really great feedback, and then these conversations you can have around one of the big advances that's happened in peripheral artery disease is now we don't just have bare balloons or bare stents. We actually have combination products that have a drug that's embedded either on the balloon or on the stent. And that's completely changed outcomes for these patients. And it came from conversations with physicians about how dissatisfied they were with the outcomes they were getting for their patients. Um, success rates of 50% at 1 year, and we knew we could do better. And so being able to apply the things that we were learning and being able to do that iterative work, to me, again, is just so fulfilling. So for me, MedTech has just been a wonderful place, as you can tell by the fact that I've been here for 20 years.
That's amazing. And I'm sure there were so many. I mean, you might not have realized it at the time, but as you're in those sessions and doing that collaboration where you have the physicians there and the hands-on, there were probably, I'm sure you can think back, some just pivotal moments, kind of like that fork in the road where the light bulb goes off and it's like, aha, we got to make this change and drastically have an impact on patient care. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting. And like you said, it's probably as useful to know what you don't want to do as it is to know what you do want to do. So you're so right. That feedback and that collaboration that you have together is what to me makes what makes MedTech so special.
It really is. And there's so few industries out there where, I mean, and I don't like to call the physicians the consumers and the patients, but really they are of the products, and where you have that much just interaction into the development of these devices and, their improvements, their modifications for the good. So it's very exciting. It's very exciting. Were there any moments early in your career when, you faced doubts or challenges about being in this industry? You thought, I'm not sure this is where I need to be?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think we all have those moments in our careers. I'll tell you, I mean, the industry's changed so much just in the time that I've been there. When I joined Guyton and then it was acquired by Boston Scientific, just going through an acquisition was a very big change. Having a bigger company acquire us, having to learn a new culture, having to work through that. I thought there were a lot of times there that I wondered, am I in the right place? Am I, is my career going to flourish here in this new organization? But even more fundamentally, when I started in medtech, and again, this was quite a few years back, there was this almost kind of a requirement that you be in a sales role in your career in order to be able to advance. And I've never been in a sales role. That's never been a role that worked for me in my career progression. And and it's been really interesting to see how some of those things have changed over time. I still think it's an incredibly important experience, but I think it's not mandatory in the way that it used to be. And so I think there are more different ways to make an impact in an organization than there were, a few years back, which is nice to see.
That is. And it's nice to see that there's not just one path to get to where you want to go. There can be different avenues and you can have a dramatic impact if, for example, sales isn't the path you want to go. So,
Yeah, exactly. And I think, to be honest, what do they say now, right? It's not a career ladder, it's a jungle gym, right? It's about taking all kinds of different roles and looking for things where you're going to learn something, you're going to contribute something, and, continuing to seek those most challenging roles, rather than, kind of always looking for, obvious upward progression, if that makes sense.
absolutely. So, what did your career path look like in terms of the different roles you took? You didn't go the sales route. What did your path look like?
Yeah, I think so. I was an MBA intern. I think there were a class of maybe 40 of us that started. I think I might be the only one that didn't go into sales coming out of the MBA program. And I came into marketing. I have always loved marketing. That is my home base, my home function. And I just loved getting close to customers, but thinking more broadly about the market and thinking globally about the market. And so that's where I started. Did many different roles in marketing. I did marketing to referring physicians. I did new product development marketing. I did kind of a marketing strategy role. all within one division, cardiac rhythm management, which is the business that Boston Scientific acquired from Guidant. And then I did a little bit of kind of a sideways role where I went into a corporate role, overseeing all of the divisions, and allocating out R&D spend across all the divisions of Boston Scientific. And I always credit that with being, maybe one of the hardest jobs I've done, but the job that also progressed my career the most, because I learned about all of these new parts of the business, and was able to find the division that kind of really, sparked that passion in me, which is the peripheral interventions business, the vascular business I'm in now, and made that transition by going to the corporate role, made that transition into vascular, and have been in vascular ever since. I did marketing in vascular. I did new business development, which for us means mergers and acquisitions work for the division. And then I took a VP of marketing role and then a division president role, which is the role that I have today.
You've had a lot of hats. And it's so nice to just, I can see it on your face. You enjoy so much the space that you're in. What
Yeah.
are some of the hardest transitions that you had as you kind of maneuvered through this jungle gym? I mean, I'm sure it wasn't all smooth sailing. I'm sure there were times where you felt, okay, I need to do this role to get this experience, but really I can't wait to move on to the next.
Well, I will say I think that corporate job felt a bit like that because um, it felt like an aggregator of data rather than a builder. And while I think we did really important work for the business and truly transformative work for the business, it didn't get me as excited on a day-to-day basis as building a business and driving solutions across a business unit and across a physician specialty did. So that was one, like I said, I credit it with where I am today, but at the same time, it was not my favorite job I've ever had. And so I encourage folks often to think about where are you going to grow, and how are you going to challenge yourself to learn more and get out of your comfort zone. And the other thing I'll say is, I came into peripheral vascular at the director level. And I didn't know and I had never spent time in the division. It was very humbling to walk into a division at that level and not know the technologies cold. And so, I had to really think about what could I contribute to my team and how could I help my team be successful when I wasn't the expert. And a lot of times that can be a really uncomfortable place to be, especially if you've been expert for a long time. So that's another one where I would say, gosh, I really stepped out of my comfort zone, but I'm so glad that I did. And I learned so much from the experience.
Yeah, you've touched on something that's been kind of rooting in my mind a little bit, and it's about sort of developing a mindset or habits that you can keep in the back of your mind when you're having to make those difficult career moves or step into a role where you don't feel like the expert, you feel, a little bit out of your league. What were your personal habits or mindsets that kept you going?
Yeah, I just had to push myself past this fear of asking a stupid question. And I had to, I always told myself in the back of my mind, you're only new for such a short period of time. You have to take advantage of it. Because when you're new, you get this newbie card, right? And like no one thinks twice about you asking, a question that seems very basic. But man, that card expires. And after a while, and after a while, you can't really ask those questions anymore. And so, like, really leaning into the newbie card and taking like that opportunity to ask all the questions. Um, you know, I think there's so much in medtech that's apprenticeship, that is sitting with someone and learning with them. And I think too, in medtech, we're so lucky to have physician customers, and so many of them are amazing teachers and they love to teach. And if you demonstrate that desire to learn, you're going to find a lot of people that want to teach you. And today, there's so many resources out there where you can do so much self-learning, but there's nothing like sitting down and having a conversation to really deepen that expertise.
And I can imagine so many of these people became mentors to you early on. You know,
Yeah.
so how did those relationships start? Was it just, kind of getting over the fear of, I'm going to ask this question. It feels like a silly question to me, but I'm going to ask it. I'm sure there's millions of people that had the same question if they were in your shoes when they started. But how did some of those relationships with some of those, whether it be physicians or other people in your space, how were you able to, initiate those, the ones that really sustained you and that grew into really solid mentorship relationships?
Yeah, I'd say a couple things. One was really deeply listening and making it clear that the time that someone invested in explaining things to me was being taken to heart, and that it was something that I really valued. So whether that was doing homework in advance so that things that I could learn on my own I had, and I was asking kind of a next more in-depth question. But the other thing I'd say that I did that I highly recommend folks do is like take a first pass. Like oftentimes the work in marketing is about assessing like the size of a market, right? We talked about these balloons that open up arteries. How big is that market? Well, take a first pass and think about, how would I do that work? And then show that to someone and have them make it better, right? Help you side by side make it better rather than coming and asking for help with a blank sheet of paper, if that makes sense. Uh,
Absolutely.
I find that people love to help you make something better, but if you come with nothing started, um, you know, it it's harder to have that conversation, right? And it's harder for them to feel as though you're really invested in the output. So whatever that looks like in your role or in your internship or first job, it's like, how do you take that first crack um, so that you have a basis for the conversation? I don't know, Jenny, does that resonate for you?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think sometimes that can be a situation where you're just feeling like you're held back by fear. What if I do it wrong? What if I present something that's so far out of left field, they're going to think that I really, I shouldn't be here. And it's not the case. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, people want to see that you're invested, and any effort, any attempt is going to be well received. And who knows? There's probably been times where your initial first pass at something was an approach that no one had tried before and might even have impacted the business or decisions being made because it was a unique new way to approach something, to look at something that everyone had been doing everything the same way for so long. No one had considered doing it that way. So it's an important piece of how just innovation itself happens. And I think when people see you're invested, it brings that collaborative team aspect to it, and then those relationships just do start to flourish after that, because people that are as excited about the business as you are, you get your heads together and start working on a collaborative goal. So I think absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think that's so well said because it just makes uh, it gives you a starting off point to have a more meaningful conversation. And like you said, it's hard sometimes to put yourself out there, but at the same time, no risk, no reward. So it's worth it. I think it's definitely worth it.
Absolutely. You've had to, and I'm sure you still have to, being the division president, balance sort of the technical, medical, as well as the business sides of the, two sides of the coin, right? How do you balance both of those?
Yeah, it's a bit of what I talked about earlier, where you can't be the expert in everything.
Mhm.
And what I think what my job is oftentimes in the role that I'm in now is it's making sure that we have the right people on the right projects. It's making sure that we're giving the right projects the right resources and that I'm asking the teams tough questions.
Mhm.
Uh, and to me, when I think about those things, right? I think about resources, I think about talent and developing talent, and I think about how do we challenge the teams in constructive ways to help unlock even more potential than they might realize exists. And so, um, oftentimes, like you said, it's kind of that beginner mindset, right? You can come into something knowing a lot broadly, but maybe you don't know as much deeply about this one project they're working on. But you might be able to ask a question or string together things from other areas that create an aha moment for the team that's outside of what they thought about, which again is kind of that, what you talked about of having the ability to bring people, bring a new, fresh perspective. So, I've probably seen a million ways it can be done wrong, right? So how can I help the teams kind of avoid some of those pitfalls and then think bigger than they might think on their own?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so well said and it's so true. And I think, you bring a very important perspective on having the right people in the right roles. And it must be hard sometimes. You have to take a step back and trust those people to do those roles because you believe in them and you believe in their expertise.
That's exactly right. And then how do you continue to develop great talent? Because um, we are so fortunate to have incredible teams. And how do we put even more challenges in front of them so that they can grow their careers and have the satisfaction of seeing their products come to market or a success in their careers or take on additional responsibility, right? All of that is it's like one of the best parts of my job, right, is to see folks on my team be more successful than they thought they could be. And whether that's with a project that they have or personally from a career standpoint, it's just, it's so rewarding. And so, one of the things that, we all love to do, I know in leadership roles, is spend time with folks that are hungry for that feedback and hungry for that challenge.
Yeah. You've seen so much in all the different roles that you've had. And, you mentioned one change in the industry now where it's not as much of a requirement as it was once perceived to have that sales role within industry to progress. What else have you seen change in the industry just kind of over the years? And where do you see the next big changes, in 5, 10 years from now?
Yeah. So I think the other major change that's happened over the time that I've been in the industry is, you mentioned earlier kind of the physicians being the decision makers. And while that's oftentimes true, hospital administrators are so much more important
Mm,
in making decisions and deciding what set of products are even going to be available in a hospital and reimbursement considerations. How are these things going to get paid for? Things that, frankly, 15 years ago maybe weren't that important. Today are kind of front and center.
mm.
It used to be one of the last questions we asked was, about how the reimbursement worked for a particular product. Now it's almost one of the first questions we ask because it's such a big barrier to adoption. And so that's one big change that we've seen. The other one is just the data around these products. With the advent of real world evidence, with the ability of AI to go scour data sets. There is just so much more data about these devices and how they work, which is incredibly exciting, but at the same time creates a lot more, almost like an overwhelming amount of data for our customers. And how do we help them parse what's important?
Yeah, how do you wrap your hands around it and tease out what's important and what has meaningful impact? Because you're right, it's almost unlimited the amount of data with AI now and the digital technology and these devices often being smart devices. We're
Mhm.
collecting so much what's relevant and how can we use it? And
Yeah.
we certainly don't want to be focusing just on noise. Data for the sake of data, if it's not allowing us to make meaningful impact, probably isn't very productive.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. You're like, how do you distinguish, like you said, noise from something that's clinically relevant?
Mhm. Mhm. So many of the folks in our audience today are finishing their university degrees and getting ready to make that transition. And one of the questions that came in, and it's one that we are often asked on the Navro platform, is what kinds of roles or skills are in really the highest demand now? And what should they be being mindful of or paying attention to?
Yeah, and I can tell you, as somebody that's got kids, like, I think about this a lot because the environment they're going to grow up in and that you all are graduating into or have graduated into is really different. And so what I personally look for when we're hiring is, can this person learn new things? Because whatever they're going to be in, it's going to be constant learning. And so, can they pick up new concepts quickly? Are they adaptable? Are they hungry to learn new things? That's one. The second is problem solving. That's AI is great at going and getting a bunch of information, but at the end of the day, solving problems is a uniquely human skill set, and making decisions about when we have enough data, when we have enough certainty to move forward. Those are the things that are, really unique to us and what we can do. Honing that skill, getting a ton of practice in problem solving, whatever that looks like in your field, I think is incredibly important. And then lastly, I'd say communication skills, an ability to take a complex idea and making it simple. That is the key because it demonstrates true understanding, and it allows you to communicate important messages to other people.
It's so true. It's almost, I feel like we're in the era of pre-AI, post-AI, and these qualities that you're mentioning, the ability to learn, to problem solve, to communicate. It could be so easy just to fall back on easier methods, but they're skill sets that are essential and they're not going to go away. They're going to be requirements of any role that you have in this space. So don't get complacent, everybody.
Well, and I think that's what makes it fun, right? Like if you're always learning, if you're always problem solving and you're getting to communicate the impact that you're making, like that's fun to me, anyways.
That's what
Maybe
makes
that hopefully that doesn't make me an outlier, but to me, like that's the fun of it, right?
Yeah.
And so, continuing to hone those skills is just it's a bonus.
I'm gonna let our listeners know we can go ahead and open it up to questions. We have a few that came in, so I'm gonna get it started just with one that came in. And this is going back to your division's role and what you do from a disease state perspective. So the question that came in was, how would you tailor these applications for different diseases? Are they specific?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think what we've found is that uh, you would think you'd be able to do the same type of thing in all these different vessels of the body, but shockingly, they all react differently. So the arteries in your legs behave differently than the arteries in your arms, than the arteries in your neck. And a lot of it is around how much blood flow they have. What is the kind of what are the forces that act on those arteries? And so again, this is kind of asking that next level question, and that's why I love this question, is, being able to realize that yes, there are some things that are similar, but there are also these things that are really different, and working with physicians to say, what is unique about this particular disease state, or what is unique about this particular part of the body. You think about the way in which your knee bends, right? And you can imagine what would it need to look like to put an implant behind your knee that can take that type of torque. It's very different than maybe something you'd be able to put that sits behind your sternum, right? Where you've got a ton of stability and not a lot of movement. So just things like that, I think, are just super interesting in terms of how you think about device design.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's definitely not one size fits all. You know, it's sort of the fusion of engineering, biology, physiology, physics, all of these things together and how they're going to impact a device. Okay, we've got a question that came in from George. And the question is, what would you do differently if you could redo your MBA program? That's a great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, so what I'll tell you is I went and did my MBA full time 3 years after I graduated. I was probably one of the younger MBAs in my class, and it was great for me in that it achieved the goal I had for it, which was transitioning careers, like going from consulting into medical technology. It was perfect for that. Um, but gosh, I think if I'd worked longer, I would have gotten so much more out of the program. Like, I think, and if I look back on the classes that I took, for some of the things, especially around management and organizational design, I just wasn't ready for it because I never experienced it in that way. So, I think that was something that he was really helpful.
That's great. I'm just going to remind everybody if you have a question, you can go ahead and put it in the chat or you can raise your hand and we will go ahead and call on you. And like Kat said, no question is a bad question. So if there's something that's rolling around in your brain, chances are someone else in the audience has the same question. So get up the courage and ask. You won't regret it. One broad question sort of came in. If you were graduating today with a biology degree or an engineering degree, what first steps would you take if you wanted to go into medtech?
Yeah, I would say, you know, you can certainly look for R&D roles because we do hire engineers and R&D, and biology, chemistry majors into the organization. That's certainly one path. I would also say there's so many roles within the organization, whether it's finance or regulatory or clinical. There are just so many places where there's an opportunity to learn business. I would really encourage folks to think broadly. And then the other thing I'd say is if you're interested in med tech, uh, the it's not like the only place you can go work to get really relevant experience is a a medical technology company. You can also go work for a hospital system. Work with in a consulting firm that focuses on healthcare. There are so many different places that you can start to get relevant experience. So I would encourage you to think broadly about your career and think about what you excites you, what gets you going.
That's great advice. Yeah, there's many places to look. Just got to do your homework and broaden your perspective a little bit. Let me just shut my office window here because I have some construction company coming. 1 minute. Sorry about that. This is real life, guys. We are live. Okay, another question came in. And this is someone that's indicating they have a similar background with a BS in biomedical engineering and an ongoing master's in management at UCI. My first goal is to gain more technical experience in biomedical engineering roles such as R&D or product engineering before transitioning into a more business focused career and ultimately starting my own company. I love the ambition. So from your perspective, what strategies or steps would you recommend for someone taking this path? Or do you have a different perspective on how to approach this kind of career transition?
Yeah. So I'd say, first of all, fantastic back functions in your career at a company or moving from one company to another. Oftentimes that means you're not going to necessarily have the uh, title acceleration that you might have if you stay in one function. And you have to be okay with that. And I think it's still worth it to go get those different experiences getting a R&D experience, getting a commercial experience, getting, business strategy experience. All of those are great, but you may, and you just have to be kind of okay with it in your heart, you may see someone who has stayed in one function go faster up the ladder than you do. But what you'll find is in the long run, your trajectory will be broader and you'll have more opportunities because you've opened more doors for yourself, whether that's a startup or something else. So, you kind of, there's a little bit of a trade-off you make in your career, which again, I just eyes wide open. There's no right path, right? Do you stay in one function and try to get kind of more and more people responsibility? Or do you get a broader experience, recognizing that sometimes that may mean a trade-off, where you might still be a manager, where someone who stayed in one function is a director? And it's just, and that's up to you, right? No one can answer that but yourself.
That's great feedback. So a lot to think about. I've got one last question, and then I think the noise outside my office is going to prohibit me from doing any further. So I hope you can hear me okay. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, yes.
Guys. My universal sign language of please stop didn't get received. Life. That's life. Okay, so the question is, how realistic would you say is a person successfully transitioning to more business-oriented roles if they start off their career with more of a technical or research-focused role? And, maybe this touches a little bit on kind of what you were saying earlier with the traditional paths, maybe not being so traditional, but I'll let you go ahead and share your feedback on that.
Yeah. So I would say, a lot of this is, what we talked about before, which is like, how can you, if you're in a technical role, how can you do a special project? Like, for example, I'm just going to imagine that you're an engineer who wants to make the move into marketing, right? How do you do that? Well, you got to go meet a bunch of people in marketing, and you've got to find out, do they have a project that you could help with, kind of a 20% of your time type of project, where you could start to demonstrate to them the benefits that you can provide, with your perspective and your background, to those, to the problems that they're trying to solve. Oftentimes, that can mean, hey, can I go with you on your next field visit to visit Dr. Adamo? I hear she's an expert in peripheral vascular disease. I'd love to go with you and hear firsthand the feedback on my product or on my project that I'm working on. And, a lot of times those opportunities to interact with customers, to build those relationships, are the start and the seeds for making those transitions. I won't pretend that it's easy. I know a lot of folks get frustrated with that, but I will say I've seen it happen successfully many, many times. And a lot of it is, just continuing to make those personal connections.
That's fantastic. Personal connections, got to do the homework. You got to be willing to, take that step, initiate it, kind of get over that fear of making those first steps and those initiations, because that's relationships, that's how they start. Okay. Question came in. I have a sales background and I just started an MBA at UCI this fall. Congratulations. I am looking specifically to transition into management and having a hand in guiding corporate strategy. What advice would you give me to help achieve that goal?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, when I went to business school, you write your essay about what you're going to do. The job that I said I wanted to do was business development for a MedTech company. And I thought that was going to be my first job coming out of business school. I realized no one hires for that job coming out of business school. And for a very simple reason, in that you don't know anything about the company and you don't know anything about the technologies in the space. So, the first step coming out of business school is really gaining that foundational knowledge. And like Jenny said, sales can be a great way to do that, because you learn all the products, you learn the customer, you understand kind of the competitive landscape. All of that is great. Going into marketing is great. Going into program management isn't something we haven't talked about, but is a fantastic way to learn about the business. All of those things are critical because before you're given the kind of the keys to the car, right, to give advice on the corporate strategy, you have to come from a position of knowledge. I would say, if business strategy is super exciting to you in particular, then I would say I would definitely double kind of go down, look at two paths, right? Both med tech as well as consulting, because that is certainly a path where you can be doing more of that strategy work earlier in your career, with the downside that it's not always in the industry that you're interested in.
And to your point, you might discover it's not where you ultimately want to be in a similar fashion to your journey, thinking, okay, this is what I definitely want to do. And then you learn along the way, not so much, and which
Yeah.
leads to where you want to go. Randy is writing in asking, he is a master's student in biotechnology management, and he joined this program because he wanted to transition outside of wet lab and move into business strategy. This sounds very similar to your experience, those pipettes.
Yeah. I feel you. I feel you.
Yes. Move into business strategy and marketing roles within the industry. I wanted to ask you more of a strategy-based question. Whether it's entering a new market with a new product or promoting a new product in an existing market, how does your team tackle these challenges differently?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So thanks for asking it. When you're entering an existing market with a new product, you're oftentimes doing a ton of comparison of yourself or your new product versus the other products that are available on the market, right? So you're saying, I work for Boston Scientific, right? But if the person across from me works for Medtronic, I'm going to tell you all the reasons you should pick my product versus the Medtronic product, for example. But if you're entering a completely new market, you're talking about why should you use this product versus nothing at all, right? Oftentimes, when you're entering a new market, what you're battling against is optimal medical therapy. And you're trying to convince, with data, with information, a physician community that what they're doing today is not sufficient to treat the problems that their patients have. And so the way in which you approach it is really different in that in one, it's more of a competitive me versus, this other physical thing. Whereas in a new market, you're really trying to convince someone to do an intervention at all.
Do you find one is more difficult than the other?
I think the first is, we kind of call it hand-to-hand combat. It's it's faster. You see results more quickly. But I would say the latter, while harder, is more rewarding because oftentimes you're really getting a chance to see patients who otherwise wouldn't get treated, get an opportunity to have a better life than they otherwise would because of the technology that you're offering. Both are important in med tech. And I'd say, one is great for kind of that immediate gratification of taking share right away. The other one is more kind of long-term fulfillment.
Okay, this is the last question, and it actually is a form of one I was going to ask you. So it says, and my question to you was going to be if you could go back and give your, 22-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be? So couple that with this question that came in. What are the best habits one should pick up early on or day one of their job at a medical device company like Boston Scientific? Say
Yeah.
they're a biomedical engineer or a
Yeah.
PhD graduate.
So what's been successful for me and what I would tell my 22-year-old self to continue doing and not think you're doing it wrong is running towards big problems. What I find is big problems and big challenges are where so much of the learning happens. And I think when you are known as someone who can tackle big issues and big problems, you get more and more chances to demonstrate that skill set. And you can really develop kind of a reputation in an organization for doing the hard work. And so I would say, some people call it like run towards the fire, and don't run away from the fire. For me, that's been, like I said, where a ton of my growth and my personal learning has come from. I'd say daily habits, I would say get really comfortable learning new medical jargon, being able to read a clinical trial, abstract. Can you read it and make sense of it and understand? Can you read it critically and understand what it means? Um, getting that, getting comfortable with that, I think just pays so many dividends.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, this has been so fun. Thank you so much, Kat, for sharing your story and the incredible insights you've gained throughout your MedTech journey. I think everyone here can agree your path from MBA intern to division president, it's not only inspiring, but you've given us so much practical advice and insight that each one on this call can apply to their own careers. So thank you to everyone who joined live today to the Navro MedTech Unplugged. If we didn't get to your question or if another one comes up, please email us at education@mynavro.com and we will get you answers to your questions. And if you missed part of today's conversation or you would like to share this with your classmates or colleagues, the full recording will be available on our YouTube channel at Navro MedTech Recruiting. Again, please hit that subscribe button so we can continue to bring you really phenomenal guest experts like Kat. And you can also listen to the audio only version on the MedTech Unplugged podcast on Spotify or Apple. So thank you again for joining, Kat. Thank you for your time. This is really,
Thanks so much, Jenny. This was so much fun. I really appreciate it.
I'm so glad. We'd love to have you back. Take
Thanks.
care, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye bye.